Susie. Welcome to my watercolor video class. I'm going to go over repairs and some of the questions that have come up in my class today. And I'm also showing you a photo of my bird. Everyone keeps hearing her in the background. When you make accidents, and actually some accidents in watercolor turn out to be really nice. And sometimes just letting watercolor do what it wants to do is wonderful. That's why I love it as a medium. One of the first issues is if something comes out too light. I have laid down a light area of alizarin crimson, and it's pretty easy to fix this. But you have to consider a few things. If it's still fairly wet, you can add more color pretty easily, like I am right now, making it darker. And I'm going to go over the whole area. That's pretty much what you might have to do unless you want some little blooms in there, blossoms. You know, you're probably just going to have to go over it all and try to smooth it out and make it darker. One thing you want to be careful about, I use 300 pound watercolor paper, and I love it. It's pretty sturdy paper. But even at that, you don't want to bruise the paper. You don't want to rough up the tooth. You still want to use as light a hand as possible when you're creating with watercolor. I think that's one reason I like it, because I got arthritis and I can't use a lot of pressure. So it turns out pretty good. So there you have it. We've made the alizarin crimson a darker, richer color. Now, let's just assume we just put that down and it's too dark. Maybe we'll want to go back to the lighter color. I'm going to wet it down first. It's already pretty wet because I just wet, sorry. Don't quite have the hang of all this stuff yet, but it's wet. And now I want it back to the color it was. I can almost remove most of the color. There you go. I re-wet it and it's light again. And I can add more to it if I want and make it a little bit darker. Watercolor is a lot more workable, I think, than most people realize. You just have to use a gentle hand with it. There, we made another color. Of course, I can go back to really dark or really light. I can do whatever I want to it. And if it's pretty dry, you want to use sort of a dry brush technique. Because a dry brush won't lay down a lot of water and it won't disturb the patterns and everything that's already there. You have paint on your brush, but really it's not very wet. And that's what you're just going to have kind of practice with. I can't kind of really tell you how to do that easily. Play with it. You know, before you start to correct something, maybe just practice on a piece of paper. Now I have another issue, splatter. Well, that does happen when you're using watercolor. You get all excited and you get carried away. And so I had this background here, and I don't know what I was going to do with it, but let's just say I splashed some orange on it. Well, what I can do, actually, besides just lifting that off, is maybe splatter some more orange on it. Oh, make a little design there and think, yeah, I really wanted that background to be orange, and maybe I wanted some, you know, rose madder in a few different colors. There we go. That takes care of the splatter. All fixed. You can leave it as a splatter, like that. You know, or you can paint, kind of spread it and blend it, do whatever you want. Get a nice pattern. I mean, that's a totally random pattern there, and it can turn into something beautiful. And you can even add like the spray to it. And okay, let's have it run into some other things. So that takes care of splashing. That takes care of a color that's too light or too dark. And what about if you put a color down and you really don't want it there at all? You went over the edge of something and it's in a white area and you don't want it. I'll just pick up a little bit of cobalt blue here. And a little line of cobalt blue. I'm not going to make a real wide one. There we go. And we are going to do two things to repair this. One is, this was called Aqua Cover, I don't know if you can see it. I'm sorry, I'm my own camera person in a tripod, so it's difficult. But aqua cover's kind of like liquid paper. And 300-pound paper can take a lot of watercolor too. Quite a bit, and it won't buckle. I mean, well, if you pour a whole pitcher of water on it, it might buckle, but it really won't. And that's why I use 300-pound. And it is a bit more, but oh man, it sure is worth it. Compared to the hassle and everything, it's definitely a good price as far as I'm concerned. Now, we're going to deal with cobalt blue here, where we put some down and we don't want it. We have two options. My first one is, I'm going to blot it up as much as I can. I can tell it's still kind of damp. I'm going to take a little scrubber brush that you can get at Michael's. It's called a scrub. It's a Pritt scrub. It's used mostly for decorative painting and stuff like that. Very tough bristles. So I'm going to wet down this part of the cobalt blue. Just wet it. Hopefully the water will kind of lift the color up to the surface. I'm being very gentle here. This was a pretty broad stripe. I mean, most mistakes really aren't quite this bad. And I am just going to barely kind of scrub the color here. Just kind of rough it up a little bit, barely. Very carefully. I'm going to blot it and see how it's coming. There you go. Isn't that great? So you think you screwed something up, but whoa, it's fixable. You can do something about it. Now, that was the scrubber, and I'm sorry I went out of whatever order on that, but I wanted to get to that before it got too dried up there. Now, mine is thick. I haven't had to use this in a long time, but that doesn't mean I don't use it. I don't rely on it. I'm just getting a little bit off the tube here, and you can see it's just white. Color of the paper here, and I'm going to go over it very gently because I really don't want to disturb the paint underneath it. I don't want to bring the paint and have it come up into my brush or into the liquid paper. I just want to be able to cover it up. And when this dries, of course, it'll dry even lighter. You don't want to put it on too thick either. But that's pretty good. That's not perfect, but I really have to wait a lot of time in between for it to come out. I'd have to let it dry more, and you know, I don't want to have you hanging around for all of that. But let me just add a little bit more here. It's kind of blue, but you do a couple layers, but just be very careful. Yeah, and you can paint over that too. That is not perfect, but believe me, you can use this liquid paper here and no one will be able to see it if you use it carefully and if you blend it in. I'm going to see if it's dry enough. Maybe this one area I can paint over it. I'm not really sure if it's quite dry enough for that, but I'm going to give it a go. So I have blue there, but now I want green. There you go. You can't see it. Isn't that great? I mean, watercolor really isn't as difficult as it's made out to be. It is difficult, but it's fun and it's great, and there's lots of stuff you can do. And I think it's probably too long, so I'm going to say this is it. I'll show you negative painting and some other things later on. And thanks a lot for watching, and I hope this helps you, and I hope it encourages you to pick up watercolor for the first time, or to restart it again, or do more creative things, take more risks with it. And sorry about the parrot. I'm going to have to try to work on that. Bye.